Well, greetings and salutations, everyone, and welcome to tonight's second half. We are that much closer to tonight's live stream, just a couple more hours to go. Before we get into tonight's second half, though, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They all were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support this channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost you a cent. Click that like button. It takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads I put out daily, click that bell icon and please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things, they really do help this channel to continue to grow and go. And folks, they really do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with tonight's second half, shall we? Today's first subscriber submission. Jeff, I listen to your podcasts, and I am a subscriber. I've had odd things happen to me over the years, but this experience has really freaked me out so much that I rarely talk about it due to ridicule and the fact that I was frozen with fear and couldn't move to go investigate. It was not a dream because the dog heard it, and his barking woke me up. So here it is, 2015, late spring. I was renting a house in a suburb of Detroit, Michigan that backed up to a high school, which was perfect. That way the kids could get to school really easily. And it had been a warm day, so we slept that night with the windows open. And at the time, my husband and I stayed in the basement, and our teenage kids slept upstairs. They were still in school, so it was around 3 a.m. I'm awoken by my Pomeranian Jr. barking, and that's when I heard the sound. It was like a vibration noise. The closest example of what I mean is if you've heard a street sweeper going past the front of your house. It's noisy, and the brushes make a vibration noise. Anyway, it's noticeable, and I always notice as I'm pulling the covers down and grabbing my dog. There is static electricity very bad, like in the winter time when your house is dry. That's when I heard the screaming of a woman and the occasional help me please. More screaming, and as I looked up the stairwell of the basement, it was lit up like it was daytime. So I'm scared and I am frozen with fear. The screaming is still going on, and it sounds like this poor woman is being murdered, but she couldn't have been. Because she's still screaming, it felt like forever this was happening. When all of a sudden, everything stops. The lights, the sounds, the screaming, as if it had never happened. I waited to go upstairs, so I lied there for a while. I must have fallen back to sleep because the next thing I remember is my dog licking my face to take him outside, and it was morning. I didn't dream this. I do remember trying to wake my husband up, but to no avail. He's a deep sleeper. And unless I was to pour ice water over him, he wouldn't have woken. So a few days went by. I got the nerve to ask a neighbor next door if she had heard screaming a few nights ago. Big mistake. She said no and asked why, so I told her the experience. She looks at me like I'm a lunatic, and pretty much after that, she really never talked to me again. Lesson learned. I did share the event with my husband and kids about this. My daughter remarked of what if it was her screaming. I said, was it you? She said no, but I do regret not rushing up the stairs to see what was going on to this day. But it was as if someone was saying, no, don't go, there's danger. And aside from being completely freaked out and frozen with fear, it was like I couldn't, if I had wanted to. It was the strangest encounter I'd ever had. And I ended up moving down the street from that very house. And if I'm up late, I will go outside and look down the street just to see if whatever that was comes back. I'd see it. But I have not seen or heard anything, and I've been here 7 years now. But a lot of the people have passed away or moved since then, so whoever the woman was, maybe she doesn't live down there anymore. I'll never know. Today's second subscriber submission. Hello, Jeff. My name is L, and since I have a little time to myself today, I thought I would write to you about my encounter at a wooded waterway that's right next to where I live. So first off, I live in Louisville, Kentucky, and I'm probably 1.5 miles at most from Waverly Hill Sanitarium. That's up the hill behind me, and I've heard of 2 werewolf encounters in the parking lot at that sanitarium years ago. And I am several miles down the road from Fort Knox, which I heard from a very reliable person that in Fort Knox they are at war with Bigfoot, and they are really keeping it hidden from anyone. But my friend, he will not state why he never would say anything more about it. But I do know that this person was a professional that would risk losing a lot for stating that so-called fact, he told us. Jeff, I have no doubt that these encounters are true, and these people are not the kind that go around making up lies, or either the kind of gossip. Now I will tell you about my encounter. One morning I had woken up before dawn, and I planned going out to eat for breakfast as soon as the sun came up. I believe it was the 1st of April last year. I had no sooner got out the door and was suddenly frozen, and a hot feeling that was not the normal humid air from the spring air. And Jeff, I remember a voice that I heard in my head say, look over there. Here I am." I looked to see right inside the tree-lined waterway was what I can only describe as a giant, that what I now think was 18 to 20 feet tall, which I could see from about the waist up to the neck, and I could not see any facial features because there seemed to be a distortion of some type over this being's face, to which I recognize as a dog, and then after blinking I thought were flies, maybe just swirling and flying so thick around the face area. I could not make out any of the real features of this thing. I did notice and make out that it had smooth, white, tan-like skin that was almost totally hairless, and long hair that was light brown to his shoulders, and what really got me, Jeff, was his thick gold bracelet. It was shiny and golden because I seen his wrist, because his arms were maybe bent at his waist. This thing was totally muscle, and I mean bodybuilder type chest and arms that were just unreal because of the definition and the size of this thing's body. I was immediately hit with a calmness, and then he took a step back. It looked to me that he was immediately gone. I remember feeling like I had taken a drug and was way too relaxed, and I remember that I had to pull over before I got to the store and kind of pinched my cheeks and rolled down the window and tried to wake up, and I barely remember being at the store. And I know when I got home, I went straight back to bed, totally missing my appointment for the day. Woke up that evening wondering what the heck did I see, and what the heck did it do to me where I slept all day. Well, that is my encounter, Jeff. Today's third subscriber submission. Hello, Jeff. After listening to your shows on Dulce, I thought you may find this interesting. I was born in Dayton, Ohio, and grew up in Kettering, which is a suburb of Dayton. As you probably know, Dayton is home of the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. One afternoon in August of 1972, I was taking a nap on the living room couch, and my brother and a friend of ours were hanging out on the front porch. My brother runs in the house shouting, "Jack, there's a flying saucer above our house." I started laughing and said, "Sure there is." He screamed, "There is." I thought he was putting on a good act, so to humor him, I went outside. When I got outside, it was no longer over our house, but over the house across the street. It was about the size of an F-4 Phantom, disc-shaped with a dome, light gray in color. It made no sound. I'm not sure how to describe the motion other than to say it was floating. It drifted slowly over the church next to our neighbor's house, hovered, and then slowly started to move away. Suddenly it accelerated rapidly, and I watched it until it receded into the distance. Neither of us told our mom about it. My parents were separated, and we spent the weekends with our dad. As usual, Sunday we went to our grandparents and had dinner with them. When my grandfather and I were alone, I told him what had happened. He was the one person who I thought may believe me. He just sat in his armchair, smoking his pipe, and was pondering what I said. I said something to the effect that I wondered if something they were testing at Wright-Patterson. He nodded his head, and we never spoke of it again. During the 80s, my brother and I were both in the Navy. Once we were on leave at the same time and visiting our mom and stepfather, who lived in South Florida. I asked him if he remembered the saucer incident, and he said no. My mom asked me when was that, and I told her. August of 72. It turned out that my mom and my aunt had seen the saucer in that month as well. My aunt and her family lived in the same neighborhood, and they were on the front porch talking, and they saw the saucer. My mom said it was glowing. Fast forward to 7 to 8 years ago, I was a department manager at a hardware store. I was helping an older, rather frail-looking gentleman, and he mentioned he was at Area 51 during the 50s. While I was helping him, he mentioned it twice more. So I said, "Sir, I have to ask you if you can tell me anything from your time there." He did, and I will relate that in 1 minute. When he was finished, I told him I grew up near Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and told him what I saw. He nodded his head and said, "It sounds like one of ours." He then said back then we had craft that could travel from the west coast to the east coast in 15 to 20 minutes. What the gentleman told me was this. There was a freezer there that was protected by armed guards and a 20-foot-tall barbed wire fence. There were 5 coffin-sized objects in the freezer, and the base commander had to go in there every few days and verify they were there. Every 10 days or so, he had to open the coffins and verify the contents were there. He also told me that he had been exposed to radiation when the Army was doing above-ground atomic bomb testing. I forgot how many types of cancer he had over the years. After he finished talking with me and I helped him with his purchases, he thanked me and said he enjoyed talking to me and looked forward to seeing me again soon. I never saw him again. So now I can hopefully get some sleep. I've had that feeling that I should share this with you. I hope this information may be useful. P.S. A year or two after I spoke with the old gentleman, I read The Day After Roswell by Colonel Philip Corso. My father read that book, and he mentioned it to me several times. At one part of the book, he talks about 5 dead aliens that were being shipped on a flatbed truck with wreckage to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Crazy enough, a couple of weeks ago, I had shared an excerpt of that book with you guys, talking about the night these, I guess, delivery happened. Very interesting read, because they had talked about the coffin sized boxes and, you know, what was in those boxes. So this kind of verifies it for me. Tonight's final subscriber submission. This next subscriber submission is a gentleman. He and his, I believe, granddaughter have kind of a Bigfoot kind of tracking or viewing thing that they do. It's pretty interesting. He's been watching Bigfoot for a while, so he sent me this email, which is very fascinating. Jeff, how are you? We continue to track our Bigfoot out at our Sky Lakes viewing area in Oregon. though we lost 1 year to a forest fire, and the year after that snow, the melting flooding, which made the area virtually impassable well into the summer. We were actually stuck in a snowdrift barely halfway up the access road on June 26th, and we were in a hulking big 4x4 Dodge 5500, not some little smart car, and had to hike almost 3 miles just to get to our usual jump-off point. Unfortunately, when we finally got to the jump-off point, we could go no further. What area wasn't chest-deep in snow was near chest-deep in meltwater, and Sky Lakes are all basically Cache Basin lakes, fed by meltwater, and in a wet year, that means that 4-mile lake or so, named for its usual dimensions, is a whole lot closer to being a 10-mile lake, which may have been our godsend or a salvation. Although we've had reliable reports of dogmen in the area, and though I've occasionally seen suspicious tracks, somewhat elongated and rather large canine or canid type tracks, I have not seen any dogman or clearly dogman evidence. Bigfoot sightings, by contrast, are virtually a guarantee. On this particular day, we did not see any Bigfoot. The first time I've been in that area without a sighting, but that may be due to the fact that we were unable to penetrate into our usual viewing area, which was isolated by the snow and runoff. Let me note that the state-run campsite up there is usually open by the beginning of June, but it was closed and inaccessible in late June, and I'm not sure if it ever opened up that year. We usually have to pass through and beyond the campsite to get to the viewing area, and there was no one there at all. And the concierge, which runs the campsite, was closed and locked up tight. Meanwhile, without any campers or hikers or hunters in the area, I suspect the Bigfoot felt no compulsion to post any sentries, or watchers as we dub them, and the lack of any Bigfoot presence may account for what we did experience. What has assisted our Bigfoot viewing up there is their insistence on watching to make sure that people at the campsite don't come into their personal domain. Consequently, we invariably know where there will be a watcher guarding against human intrusion, and that is always our starting point for our Bigfoot hunts. They don't mean they hunt Bigfoot, they mean they watch them. What we experienced were several periods when the woods, which were incredibly noisy most of the time, were absolutely dead quiet. I mean nothing, no bugs, birds, frogs, nada. That is not an experience we've had with the Bigfoot, which most animals tend to take in stride. The Bigfoot may spook the ground squirrel or deer, but they don't silence the forest. I've never experienced such absolute silence before this day. I've also not experienced such a sense of being stalked. At one point during one of these silent periods, a mountain jay off to our right on the opposite side of a seasonal melt lake separating us from whatever was troubling the residents began to squawk in alarm. It then went quiet. A bit later, to our left front, as though something was trying to find its way around the meltwater lake, a crow took up a similar alarm noise. That happened a couple more times, with the birds documenting the efforts of something to get around the lake between us and it. My grandson and I, needless to say, locked and loaded. Eventually, whatever it was must have withdrawn, and the usual cacophony resumed, and my grandson and I resumed our efforts to find a way around the seasonal ponds. We were about to give up when once more the silence hit. Once again we were able to track whatever it was, though this time, instead of being separated from us by a lake, it appeared to be stuck up on a ridge above us, with an extreme snow-covered decline between it and us. The crow, which had previously been to our left, was now to our right, given our relocation, while the different crow was off to our left near the ridgeline, and once again these birds were helping us track whatever was stalking us. as it moved from one side of the ridgeline to the other, seemingly seeking a means by which to close in on us. Very unnerving, and one definitely felt as though one was being hunted. At one point, my grandson was set up with his rifle and scope propped against a tree for stability. While he used the scope to try to spot our stalker, I, meantime, had gotten out my thermal viewer, hoping to use it to spot whatever it was. Then, suddenly, I saw a large thermal flare from some big animal as it scooted along the ridge line, darting behind a couple of large trees. At the same time, my grandson caught a brief glimpse of this same creature in his scope, describing it only as dark brown, furry animal. Unfortunately, we both really only saw the rump. Needless to say, 2 rifles were immediately trained on that area where the thing had gone to the ground. We stayed like that for another 5 to 10 minutes until once more the usual forest noise resumed. At that point, satisfied that our stalker had at least left us alone or moved away, my grandson and I got out as quickly as we could. It was a very unnerving experience. I'm a tad chagrined to admit it, but my grandson felt obliged to remark that it was the first time he'd ever seen me scared, and he's seen me in some reasonably hairy situations. I don't know what was out there with us, Jeff, but I believe it was very likely a Dogman. We don't usually see them because they seem to avoid the Bigfoot, but the Bigfoot were very obviously nowhere in the area at the time, given the weather and the other conditions out there. It's also the case that the Bigfoot don't have the same effect on other forest inhabitants. Whatever was out there with us was not friendly presence. In short, there just weren't many options to that explain the event. Anyway, that's the tale. Medical issues have kept me grounded for the last year, but I'm hoping to get back out there this summer, though we are having yet another late winter and the site has been closed. Your friend, H.
All right, folks, I hope you all enjoyed tonight's second half as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. We are that much closer to tonight's live stream, which I am looking forward to. I hope to see you all there, 12 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. With that being said, thank you for supporting this channel. You do make this channel special. Guys, stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant. And God bless every single one of you.